I want to ask you a question that I ask almost every woman that we work with that is coming from a context of a difficult marriage. Here's the question. Where were you 10 years ago? Not in the sense of circumstances, your job, your children, your address. I mean, where were you? How did you move through a room? How quickly did you form an opinion and offer it? What did you trust about yourself? How long did it take you when something hurt to know that it hurt? And then I want you to hold that woman alongside the woman that you are today. Because something almost always happens when a woman does this exercise in my office. There's a pause, sometimes a long one, and then sometimes there's tears, and with a quiet, flat certainty that is its own kind of grief. They say some version of the same thing. She's gone. I don't know where she went. I just know she's not here. What happened to her has a name, and it's called relational trauma. And it is the most pervasive, most damaging, and most consistently under-recognized form of harm that exists. Because it does not happen in a single moment. It doesn't leave a visible mark, and it accumulates slowly and visibly over years in the interior life of a person who is simply trying to love someone and, of course, be loved in return. Today I want to name what it does, because naming it is the first step towards reversing it. Before we get into this, if you're at the point where you're ready for more than understanding, where you are ready for a pathway, I've written a book called the RSVP Protocol, Reclaim Your Life, Your Voice, Yourself Without Leaving Your Marriage. And it's available on Amazon right now. The link is in the description. It begins exactly where this video begins, with recognition. And it takes you the full distance. Now, let's talk about what relational trauma actually is and what it does. Relational trauma is trauma that occurs not in a single catastrophic event, but in the repeated cumulative experience of harm within a close attachment relationship. It does not require violence. It does not require a single identifiable moment that everyone would agree was terrible. It can develop, and frequently does, inside a marriage that looks functional from the outside. Inside the home where no one was ever struck. Inside a relationship where the harm was delivered quietly, through criticism, through dismissal, through emotional withdrawal, through the slow and consistent erosion of another person's sense of self and reality. This matters enormously for the women that we work with, because one of the primary reasons women in these marriages delay seeking help, delay naming what is happening, and delay giving permission to themselves to take their own pain seriously, is that they do not believe what they have experienced qualifies as trauma. They say, right, nothing dramatic happened. He never hit me. It's just a difficult marriage, and, relationships take work. But here's what 30 years of clinical practice and the research that's accumulated in the last couple of decades has on complex relational trauma. This is what's clear, unmistakably clear. The nervous system does not require a single dramatic event in order to be traumatizing. It requires sustained exposure to an environment in which it cannot predict safety. And that is precisely the environment that chronic emotional harm in marriage creates. You do not need to have survived something dramatic to have survived something real. And trauma is not something you remember. It's something your nervous system learns. If you ever thought, I understand my trauma intellectually, but my body still does not feel safe, this book is written for you. In the Trauma Recovery Blueprint, I introduce the Relational Nervous System Integration Model. It's an integrative framework that bridges polyvagal theory, internal family systems, and EMDR-informed trauma healing. It helps explain how trauma reshapes the body, emotional patterns, relational expectations, and the nervous system itself. This is not simply a book about coping. This is a whole new framework for understanding healing. The Trauma Recovery Blueprint is out now on Amazon. Click the link below for more information. Traumatic. Let me be specific, because this is where I believe the most important work of recognition happens. Not in the naming what he did, but in the understanding what it did to you. The first thing relational trauma does is change your relationship with your own nervous system. You become chronically hypervigilant, scanning the environment for threat so consistently and automatically that you have stopped experiencing as scanning. It just simply feels like how you are. The raised shoulders, the shallow breath, the gut that never quite unclenches, the sleep that is always a little shallow, always a little ready to come back to alert. The second thing it does is fracture your self-trust. When your perceptions have been consistently challenged, when your emotional responses have been consistently reframed as unreliable, when your memory of events has been regularly disputed, something in your own architecture, your inner authority begins to crack. You stop trusting what you see, what you feel, and what you know. And you begin outsourcing your reality to someone who has consistently provided you with an inaccurate and unhelpful account of it. The third thing, and this is the one that breaks my heart most consistently, is that it changes your relationship with your own emotions. Women in long-term relational trauma frequently describe a particular kind of numbness. It's not the absence of feeling exactly, but it's the disconnection from it. They know intellectually that something is wrong. They cannot always feel it because the feeling became too costly, too early, and the system learned to keep the emotions at a distance. And the fourth thing relational trauma does is change your relationship with other people. The capacity for safe attachment, for genuine, vulnerable, trusting connection, that becomes associated with danger, because the last place you were genuinely open to someone, genuinely unguarded, was the place where the harm occurred. These are not character changes. They're adaptations, intelligent, necessary, physiologically appropriate adaptations to an environment that was not safe. Here's the good and very important news, is that these adaptations can be reversed because they're adaptations. You've adapted to an environment, but that can be changed. I think of a woman I worked with, I'm going to call her Grace for our purposes here. She came to me not in an acute distress, which was part of what made her situation so easy to miss or overlook. She was functioning, managing, and she described herself, when I asked, as fine, tired but fine. What emerged over the early weeks of our work was a picture of a woman who had been in a state of sustained, low-grade alert for so many years that she had forgotten it was alert. She thought it was just how she was. I'm just anxious by nature. I'm a worrier. I'm just someone who has found it hard to relax. That's what she told herself. She had also, over the years of her marriage, developed what she called a skin of glass. The phrase stopped me. She said that everything that happened reached her immediately, fully, and without any buffer. Not because she was oversensitive. She was at pains to offer that she was not oversensitive, but because the normal protective layer that most people carry between themselves and the world had been worn away. Years of having her responses managed, her feelings reframed, and her perceptions disputed, these had left her without the ordinary insulation that we carry that allows a person to have an experience and then let it pass. She was not broken. She was raw. I think she even described it also as she felt like a burn victim. She had been made raw by an environment that had slowly and without anyone naming it, traumatized her. And so what we worked towards together was the rebuilding of that layer. Not as armor. I've never been interested in helping people become armored up and defended in that way, but as the normal, healthy buffer that allows a person to be present in their own life without being overwhelmed by every moment of it. That is stabilization. That is the beginning of recovery from relational trauma. And that is where the RSVP protocol begins. Here's something I've observed consistently across my 30-year career, across hundreds of women navigating this particular kind of pain. The moment a woman understands what she is carrying is trauma, not weakness and not immaturity, and not a failure of faith or a character. Something shifts in her. Not everything all at once, but something foundational shifts. The self-blame begins to soften. Not because she's, absolved of anything. She's not carrying guilt so much as she's carrying shame, which is a different and frankly a harder thing. But because the framework changes inside, that's the beginning of change. She's not deficient. She's injured. And, injured people heal. Deficient people simply manage. This is why I've spent considerable time in this video doing the work of naming and describing, because I've seen the naming itself do clinical work. I've watched a woman hear the words relational trauma and feel, and what I could see it with my own eyes, something release in her body. Not because the words fixed anything, but because they finally described something accurately. And accuracy, after years of having your reality misdescribed, is its own form of medicine. If that's happening for you as you watch this, if something in you is releasing as you hear your experience described, I want you to stay with that. It's not nothing. It is the very beginning of the path back to yourself. The work of recovering from relational trauma does not happen in a single video, even one as awesome as this one, or a single insight. It happens in layers, in the sustained, supported, patient work of rebuilding a nervous system, a self-trust, an interior life that relational harm has slowly dismantled. In the second video of this series, I'm going to talk about why relational trauma inside an ongoing marriage is specifically different from other forms of trauma, and why it requires specifically designed resources to address. And I want to point you towards two things that are available right now. The first is the RSVP protocol, the book I mentioned at the beginning of this video. It's available on Amazon. It is the framework that I've built for women doing exactly this work. The link is down below in the description. The second is the Trauma Recovery Blueprint. This is my dedicated resource for people that are navigating the specific terrain of relational trauma in marriage. Really, any kind of trauma. It is a blueprint. It's a pathway of healing to recover from trauma. So if what I've described today resonates, if the four things I named felt like a description of your interior life, the Trauma Recovery Blueprint is the guided pathway through it. Also on Amazon, also link in the description. Now, if you want to do this work in community surrounded by women who understand your experience, without you having to explain it, the Detox Your Marriage community link is there too. And finally, you've been carrying this long enough by yourself. Resources exist, the community exists, the pathway exists. I'll see you in the next video.